Thank you. Thank you very much. So, we are celebrating European travel, and in the next hour, I would like to complement the class that we teach on Venice, Florence, and Rome by talking about Italy beyond Venice, Florence, and Rome. This is small town Italy. This is the pithy wonder of Italian culture, and we're going to be looking from north to south across Italy. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'm going to get right off on this because it's my favorite country and there's so much to cover. When we think about the wonders of Italy, Italy is a challenging country, and in a lot of ways, my mark of a good traveler is how they enjoy Italy. Remember, you have to take Italy in its terms, on its terms. It doesn't work as efficiently as Germany, and that's one reason Italy is my favorite country in Europe. A good way to experience the delights of Italy is to get away from the big cities. A lot of people complain about the expense of Italy. Well, they're going to the most touristy places. If you go to the less touristy places in the small towns, Italy becomes more affordable. You've got these charming towns, and in each town, you've got welcoming people. And that's one great thing about Italy. I've been traveling and researching and working around Europe for 4 months a year for the last 30 years. I have more friends in Italy than almost every other country put together. I don't know what it is, but the Italians just are lots of fun. They love their culture. They love to lavish edible culture on you. And it's just our challenge to become a temporary local. Make the scene. Get in the square in the morning and grab a newspaper and fit in with the locals. One of these guys might be a tourist. Probably not, but I mean, it is possible. It is possible, and that's what you want to do. You know, if you're driving through a little village and there's a cheese festival, stop the car, get out, eat some cheese. This is how you travel. You don't need a list of famous sites. You don't need to see Michelangelo and Leonardo every day. You've got people who are passionate about great cheese, about their culture. People that are salt of the earth, that you can wander into their farm and strike up a conversation. You can pull up a chair and sit with the ladies in the ghetto, you know? Every little town has a beautiful corner where you can be part of the scene. Beautiful women, beautiful wine, what more could you want but small town Italy? Now, there's a passion for culture. I was in one little town, and late in the summer, they have a day that is dedicated to a festival in the main square where the older kids teach the younger kids how to make a good ravioli. I mean, it's just beautiful, the love they have of their culture and how they make a point to send it from generation to generation. Of course, Italy is a very Catholic place. Church attendance is very low, but Italy is a very Catholic place, and you see that in the churches, you see that in the beautiful cemeteries, you see that in the niches, in the different chapels, you see that in the football stadiums. I mean, that's the real religion of Italy, I think, is the soccer. We say football, or we say soccer, they say football. There's a chance to enjoy the passion they have for the second religion of Italy, I think, when you remember that they're so into football. I mean, this is a little shrine in Naples to Maradona. Of course, his name sounds like Madonna, but it's Maradona. But it's just a reminder that, yes, there's a lot of Catholicism in Italy, and they're really into their sports as well. Getting around Italy is much more straightforward than it used to be. Here's a train departure board. You don't need to speak Italian. You can imagine this as trains in the departure mode. And when we look at that, again, you don't need to speak Italian. You've got departure in 4 languages underneath that. And then below that, you've got different columns, 4 or 5 different columns. One must be where it's going. The other would be what kind of train, what time it's leaving. There's a column with nothing on it on this particular train schedule called ritardo, which is if the trains are late, and then binario, which must be the track. The key figure on this photograph is the little clock below. Right at the bottom of that schedule, you see it's 14:50 and 58 seconds. That's 2:50, and that means these trains are still there. It's 5 minutes late, but the train on track 14 is still there on track 14 according to this schedule. Know how to use the schedules, and you know what's happening right now. And I'll remind you, once you get it perfectly mastered, there's going to be a strike and nothing else matters, okay? A key word for you in Italian is sciopero, and that is a strike. This is just a reminder that Italy is chaos. Italy is bureaucracy. Italy is corruption. Italy is la dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. Italy is, there's a traffic jam, let's set up our card table and have a picnic. You see, It's just that love of life, that flexibility, that intensity, that under the table of the economy, it all seems to work. If there's a strike, go to the station and take any train heading out in that direction. You'll get there. Follow the locals. When you do use public transportation, they've got a system where you have to stamp your ticket. If you don't stamp your ticket, you very well may be found by a plainclothes checking officer and given a very expensive fine. There's no slack cut for stupid tourists. You need to date the ticket or you're riding without a ticket. And you've got these boxes on the train tracks and as you enter the buses. Driving in Italy is a delight, except in the cities. I would do Italy on 2 overlays, one with the public transportation for the cities, and then if I'm going to rent a car, I would use the car not in the cities where you just park them and hope they're there when it's time to leave. But when you're tooling around the countryside, that's where a car is nice. They've got a beautiful system of freeways. The difference between Italy and Germany is you have toll booths every few minutes or every half an hour or so on an Italian freeway, whereas in Germany it's toll-free. As long as you're willing to pay the tolls, you can enjoy great freeways in Italy and the mobility of getting to those high, little distant corners while you travel. All the details are covered in our literature. I just want to make a point. We've got I think our Italy book must be 12 or 1,400 pages. Half of that is Venice, Florence, Rome, and half of that is what we're covering right now in this talk. All the details would be in the Rick Steves Italy book. Get this year's edition. There are also guidebooks for the great cities, Venice, Florence, Rome. We've got a phrase book. It's just so much fun to have a phrase book in Italy. Then if your taxi's going way too fast, you can flip it open and find the taxi section, and you can say in very clear Italian, if you don't slow down, I will vomit, okay? You need language to handle Italy. I do want to remind you, we make a lot of TV shows. We've got 13 shows on Italy, and that covers Italy from top to bottom. If you're going to Sicily, if you're going to the Alps, if you're going to the Riviera, we've got a TV show for you, and you can watch them anytime at ricksteves.com, or you can get the DVD or watch it on public television. Now, the best of Italy is shown on this route, and this is, in the old days, we used to have a longer tour of Italy, and that's what I would do in 22 days in Italy. Of course, Venice, Florence, and Rome are the half of that, and the rest of it is what we're going to be covering today. We're basically going to start in the north, the Italian Riviera, the lakes north of Milano, the Alps north of Venice. Then we're going to go down to the Leaning Tower of Pisa and into Tuscany and Umbria. That's the center of Italy, between Florence and Rome, Tuscany and Umbria. And then we're going to go south of Rome to Naples, Sorrento, Pompeii, Paestum, the Amalfi coast. That's an amazing concentration of sites south of Naples. So you got Tuscany and Umbria between Rome and Florence. You got the Riviera. You got the Alps. You got the lakes far in the north where Italy is welded to Switzerland. And then you got the magical area around the Amalfi coast. And then way down below the boot, the football, the island south of Italy is Sicily. We'll finish in Sicily. Now, the core of Italy, Venice, Florence, Rome, I'm not going to talk about today. That's our most popular itinerary of the 35 itineraries of the groups that we leave around. There's another 1-hour talk that I have. You can watch it in our website, and that talks about Venice, Florence, Rome. Right now, I want to talk about that parallel Italy, and I've taken this tour as a participant. It's called Village Italy, and it doesn't do a hint of the big cities, and it's like, wow, I didn't even know Italy had this much small town and countryside dimension. This is the wonder of Italy for Italophiles, and that's what we're going to talk about now. The Italian Riviera is one of my favorite places in all of Europe, specifically the Cinque Terre, the 5 towns. You got 5 towns nestled in the most rugged part of the Italian coastline, towns like this. This is Vernazza, or we've got another angle on Vernazza. We've got Manarola, and these towns, you can walk to each town. Rio Maggiore, Monterosso al Mare is the resort of the area. In one morning, you could walk from one town to the other, going through all 5, and it is just a delightful day. And the evening, you've got all the charm you can imagine of little, funky, humble Riviera resorts. Not the big, fancy, Portofino kind of places where the jet setters are, but this is where you get Italy in your laps, where the local people are hanging out on the beach. Where you can take a humble little boat from town to town on your sightseeing. You can get between the towns by boat, by train, or by hiking. And one of the charming things about the Italian Riviera for me is the local people. They're waving out their window as you hike by, and they rent out their rooms. Remember, in these towns, the government preserves the buildings. There are no modern buildings, therefore there are no comfortable hotels. And that's good news because it keeps away the most obnoxious slice of the traveling public, people who need fancy hotels. They're all complaining about traffic jams and being ripped off by the waiters in Portofino, and you're here in Italy. But you got to stay in a funky, humble little guest house or a pension, or you're staying in people's home. This is an example of somebody's home in Vernazza, and there's hundreds and hundreds of private rooms for rent in this area. Locals make money by renting out their extra rooms. All sort of eccentrics and creative people, artists love the Italian Riviera. Nature lovers, it's a national park now, so you've got well-tended trails and you can hike from town to town. This is the Via dell'Amore, the walkway of love. And you've got a tradition of dry stone masonry. I love to watch the local artisans make sure the terraces are strong and rebuild the bridges after a flood and so on, and you'll see that tradition still being embraced. I want to remind you they had a terrible flood a few years ago. These towns are built on ravines, and 100 years ago they thought, hey, here's a clever idea, let's pave over the ravine and we'll have a main drag. That's nice until you get a freak rainstorm and the surrounding hills serve as a funnel. It pushes all the water into that ravine and it overwhelms the drainage pipe underneath the main street, and what you have is a city flooded. Vernazza and Monterosso al Mare were basically, the businesses on the ground floor were destroyed. Vernazza was uninhabitable for several months. They've rebuilt the city, and today it's looking as good as ever, and the flood brought Vernazza a new beach. This beach wasn't there a few years ago, and today they're enjoying it. So it's ready for prime time, it's back and good, and you can bet their drainage system is very clean and open and ready for the next flood. Wonderful, wonderful cuisine in the Italian Riviera. This is the region called Ligure, and you've got the birthplace of pesto and focaccia right here, and beautiful seafood. Fresh seafood, and you'll enjoy that while you're in the Italian Riviera, along with local wine, the sweet wine. The Sciacquitra is famous with biscotti. Grab your favorite travel partner, enjoy a sunset on the edge of a castle with the local wine and the biscotti. Those are traffic-free towns, basically. There are towns with lots of traffic nearby on the Riviera. I just stay away from them. If you got limited time, I don't know why you would do the Riviera anywhere but in the Cinque Terre. North of Milano, you've got the Lake District. And the lakes, the big question is which lake? This is Lake Garda. Well, my favorite lake, without a doubt, is Lake Como, Lago di Como. And the best town on Lake Como is Verona. One reason I like it, it's because it's just an hour train ride from Milan. You could fly into Milan and spend your first night in Verona. That's what our tour groups do, because that's a mellow place to get over jet lag. Verona, from there you stay in a little hotel like this one. You can hop on the ferry and you can hop around the island. This is the town of Verona. Gorgeous place for a romantic little break. That's why they call it honeymoon country, Luna di Mille. This is where Italians love to go for their honeymoons and weekend too. You've got the mountains of Switzerland just to the north of there. And again, you've got traditional steamers that take you all along the lake, most popularly to Bellagio. Bellagio is just a 10-minute boat ride away from Verona. North of Venice, you've got the Italian Alps, the Dolomite. And the Italian Alps have a certain charm of their own, and this is an area called Alto Adige or Sud Tyrol, depending on the language the people speak, because in this area they speak German and Italian. This was part of the Habsburg Empire, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire until World War I. Suddenly, after the Austrians the Habsburgs lost World War I, Italy inherited this part of the Alps, and they called it Alto Adige instead of the South Tyrol. And here you see the welcome in 3 languages, an ancient Latin language, in German, and in Italian. Great skiing up there, and in the summertime you can go to the ski areas and enjoy sort of a beach ambience high in the mountains. I just love the high meadow called the Alpi di Susi. And the best headquarters for exploring this area, and I looked all over the place. Most of the Dolomite just feels like a dried up ski resort in the summer. I don't like it. But Castelruth, or Castle Roto, because there's 2 names for the towns, one German and one Italian, don't be confused when you're driving, is the best home base for exploring the Dolomite. And every time I go to Castelruth, there's some sort of traditional culture going on. I just love it. At the valley floor below Castelruth is a great town called Bolzano. And in Bolzano, the main stop is to see Uzi, the Iceman. He was thawed out of a glacier. He goes way back to ancient times, and it's a fascinating look at culture from that day and age. Also, on that valley, this is the valley going up and over into Germany from Italy, you've got a string of really impressive castles because of the strategic nature of that valley. And my favorite castle there is Reifenstein. And Reifenstein is impressive because it is my vote for the best medieval interior of any castle in Europe. It's open a couple times a day for English visitors. The woman of the house, one of the descendant of the noble family, last time I was there, actually opens it up and helps pay the rent by taking people around her castle. But it's remarkably preserved. A fun way to cross Italy is at 12,000 feet. From Chamonix, you ride the lift up to Aiguille du Midi, overlooking Mont Blanc. From there, you get into a little gondola and you dangle silently for 30 minutes as you go over the glacier. You used to show your passport at a place called Hellbrunner Point, and then you would descend into Aosta, A-O-S-T-A. The first stop in that valley is the town of Aosta, called the Rome of the North because it's got wonderful Roman ruins. Near Venice are a number of side trips, and of course I cover Venice in the other class that deals in Venice, Florence, and Rome. And your closest side trip from Venice is Padova. And Padova is just 20 or 30 minutes away from Venice. It's amazing. Not many people go there because everybody's hell-bent on seeing Venice, but give Padova a good look. Great thing about Padova is the Basilica of St. Anthony. It's big time on the pilgrimage map in Europe, and you'll find a lot of pilgrim and a lot of great art in the Basilica of St. Anthony. Padova has a venerable historic university. I like Padova from a university visiting point of view because people are graduating all year long. There's always graduation, hilarity, and chaos and celebrations in the streets. They roast their friends in a very traditional way, and these are people getting their doctorate, you know. And then they have this is your life, and all their friends tell embarrassing stories. And then when the person is graduated, they sing this cute little song. It's kind of like, I'll just translate. You're a doctor, but you're still just an a-hole. You're a doctor, but you're still just an a-hole. Go F yourself, go F yourself. It's some of the Italian that I know. But you'll be in the streets and you'll hear these kids singing this rude song to each other, reminding them, don't get too big for your britches, you're still one of us, even though you got letters before your name. For centuries, the intellectual big shots of Italy have been coming out of Padova, and one of the great chapels to see anywhere in Europe is the Scrovini Chapel. The Scrovini Chapel, it's a masterpiece by Giotto, who was considered maybe the first modern artist. He preceded the Renaissance by about 100 years. And you step into this chapel, the whole thing is frescoed in an ensemble. It's all very tied together, telling beautiful stories right out of the Bible, and you can see the best art in Europe from about the year 1400 right there at the Scrovini Chapel. You will need a reservation to see that. This is one of those precious sites that you cannot get in without a reservation. Any good guidebook explains that. Any good tourist knows you don't need to stand in lines if you use your guidebook. We were just there filming and had a great opportunity. It's part of our new series. In our latest series, we have shows now on the Veneto, that's the region around Venice, and on the Cinque Terre, complementing the 13 shows we have on Italy. That's about 7 hours of TV covering Italy just like this. It is so beautiful to sit at home with your travel partner, tune into one of our shows, and take notes. All of my favorite sightseeing experiences are in our TV shows. I want to stress I never do anything in the shows that you can't do yourself. So as you plan your trip, I hope you can take advantage of our TV shows, and all of our shows are available anytime for free at ricksteves.com. Nearby is Ravenna. And Ravenna was the eastern edge of the Byzantine Empire. When Rome fell, the eastern half lived on in Constantinople, named after Emperor Constantine, and the western fringe was Ravenna. Consequently, when you go to Ravenna, you'll see the greatest art in Europe from about the year 500, the 6th century. These are incredible mosaics. Now, if you're just lukewarm about mosaics, do it first class in Venice. But if you really are an early Christian church mosaic aficionado, you got to go to Ravenna. I mean, these are just sumptuous. And you see Justinian, and you see all of the beautiful early Christian examples. Here we have Jesus holding his cross as if it's a sword, dressed up like a Roman soldier, stepping on symbols of evil, with a banner that says, I am the way and the light and the answer, follow me. And it's just a powerful sort of notion of early Christian church making its way into Europe. You get these early views of Jesus, which is a Jesus without a beard. You can tell it's a Roman beard, a Roman Jesus if he has no beard, and after the Middle Ages, he has a beard, and this is the cusp between ancient and medieval art. Jesus sometimes without a beard and sometimes with a beard. When we go farther west, we get to Verona. And Verona is a great Roman city with a Roman bridge and a Roman Colosseum. And it's a city with a wonderful paseo scene. I just love being in Verona as the sun's going down and everybody's out making the scene. And Verona is very popular with tour groups because Romeo and Juliet never lived there, okay? And thousands of group tourists come in with countless tour buses to see the balcony that was not Juliet's and to rub her breast and polish it up to make sure they get a good love life and all this sort of thing. It's quite a spectacle, and it's fun to see while you're in Verona. 2 hours west of Florence is Pisa. And Pisa is famous for its Piazza of Miracles. Of course, that's the Basilica, it's the bell tower, and the baptistry. It's an ensemble. In the old days, you couldn't go into the church until you were baptized. So the baptistry, like in Florence and in Pisa, is outside of the church, and it's always beautifully decorated. And then you step into the church, and then you've got the bell tower. And the bell tower is important because that told the hours. It told when there's a fire, when there's attack, when there is a festival. It was pride. And Italy is called the land of 1,000 bell towers. People have this psychological condition called campanellismo. They love the sound of their bell tower. Here in Edmonds, if we had a bell tower, I would have campanellismo. I'd hear that bell tower. I'd go on my journey. I'd come home. I'd hear that bell tower. I know I'm home. In every little town in Italy, they have a bell tower in their church, and the people, their heart patters when they hear it. You see, campanellismo. Well, this bell tower in Pisa had a lousy soils engineer in the building process, and it didn't stay straight, and that was a problem. Today, you can visit the beautiful art, inspired Michelangelo, by the way, in the church. You can do your best to straighten up that leaning bell tower, but it's leaning a little more all the time. I don't think it's this tilty yet, but it will get there unless they figure it out. They are pulling out the moisture in the soil. They're counterbalancing it. They're doing whatever they can to shore it up. I believe they've stopped it from leaning now, and you can actually go to the top, which is quite a good experience. And when you go to Pisa, this is a good example of how Italy's getting its act together. There is a very smart system where you can make a reservation, have an appointed time, and not needlessly wait in a lot of lines. Read your guidebooks to avoid those lines. Now, I reminded you, the area between Florence and Rome is Umbria and Tuscany. Tuscany is the most popular, but they're both textbook Italian hill town, you know, a day in the life, under the Tuscan sun kind of cliche Italy. I have a hard time distinguishing between Umbria and Tuscany. They're both the ultimate in Italian countryside. You've got the skyline of the countryside just ornamented with little hill towns. Originally, all of them had spires like this. These are noble private army fortresses. Montagues and Capulets, you know, Romeo and Juliet, those were two noble families. They each had their private armies. Back in a day when there was no central government, so every rich guy had to have his own support and his own fortifications. When kings came along, they said, all the noble people have to cut off their towers. So all over Italy, the towers were cut off. For some reason, the towers of San Gimignano were never cut off. And that's the town that has the only surviving medieval skyline, I think, in a sense, of these towers. And when you go to San Gimignano, you'll see these towers, and it's quite an interesting spectacle and fun to explore. San Gimignano has a beautiful old town, characteristic of this area. My favorite hill town is called Volterra. Volterra. And when you go to Volterra, you'll find Etruscan art there. And remember, the word Tuscany comes from Etruscan. That civilization was the dominant civilization 500 years before Christ. Rome started out as an Etruscan town, all right? And south of Rome was a Greek colony. North of Rome was an Etruscan civilization. And one of the very best Etruscan museums is in Volterra. Also in Volterra, you can see beautiful alabaster workshops. One of the most exciting cities in Tuscany or Umbria is Siena. Siena in the Middle Ages was a direct competitor with Florence, and there to this day is a very strong spirit between the two, a lot of pride in Siena. And when you look at the main square in Siena, you see what towers over it is not a church spire, but it's the bell tower of the city hall. And that is a reminder to me that this is the birthplace of humanism in this part of Europe, where people got together. They had proud city-states. Remember, there was no united country of Italy until 1870. Back then, a lot of little proud city-states, each with its own main square, its bell tower, and its government that tried to make things work together. Humanism, when you sit on that main square today in Siena, you feel the local pride. It's a beautiful square. It's called Il Campo, And it feels like the beach without sand or sea. I mean, it's just everybody is there enjoying the sun, enjoying a drink, and I just love to hang out, winter or summer, on Il Campo. You can be there 1 hour in a day, and it's like this all to yourself, and come back a couple hours later, and it's just mobbed. In Siena, you've got this spirit of the Palio. And the Palio is a horse race, a medieval, no-holds-barred horse race. And I mean, there's no rules. Whatever guy gets across that finish line on his horse wins. It's a wild event. It happens twice a year, and whether you're there during the Palio or before or after it, you'll feel a lot of that Palio energy. And to be in the streets of Siena while everybody's waving their neighborhood flags. There's a dozen or 16 different neighborhoods, each with its own horse. I was there with my TV crew, and it struck me, they don't even want to promote it. It's their own private little bit of medieval glory and chaos and pride. And it's just their festival. And if you happen to be there during the Palio, it is a lot of fun. Any other time of year, it's much easier to be in Siena. And one of my favorite ways to spend $6 or $7 is to sit on the main square with a nice just a nice drink, a spritz or whatever you like to drink. And you buy the drink on the best piece of real estate, and you get little sandwiches and little munchies with it, and you just nurse the drink, and you have your nibbles that are free with the drink, and you enjoy this incredible scene. Spend a little money at the end of a hard day of sightseeing, just spending 45 minutes with your drink and your favorite travel partner, enjoying the aperitivo in a place like the main square in Siena. Siena, like any proud Italian city, will have a great cathedral. The Gothic cathedrals of Italy don't reach as tall as those in Germany and France, but they're more ornate on the facades. Inside, you'll find beautiful art that celebrates medieval aesthetics rather than Renaissance aesthetics. Siena is proudly medieval. It's Gothic, whereas Florence is proudly Renaissance. And when you go to the great museums in Siena, you're going to see more art from that medieval age with halos and gold leaf backgrounds and so on. Another great city in the area is Assisi. And of course, Assisi is famous for the Basilica of St. Francis. This is the hometown of St. Francis, who really had a huge impact on the Catholic Church and on European culture. And today, people love to go to Assisi to visit St. Francis's Basilica and his tomb. I think there's too many people just making a beeline for the Basilica and checking that out and leaving. The city itself is great. It's mobbed with visitors during the day. If you spend a couple of nights there in a whole day, I find it's a lovely place. You can hike up to the ruined castles above the town. You can marvel at how the Basilica of St. Francis was built to handle, thousands and thousands of pilgrims. There's even a main street, which is called the Street of the Pilgrims, that goes from the town square all the way down to the Basilica. I like to get myself in a frame of mind 700 years ago when people were inundating the place as pilgrims, and to see how they would accommodate the pilgrims, how they would water and feed the pilgrims, and how the pilgrims would then come into the Basilica of St. Francis and be wonderstruck at standing before the relics of St. Francis. St. Francis had a huge impact on the Catholic Church, and you can go down into the valley and find the little fixer-up church where he established his order. And this is, today it's encrusted with worship aids, and it is embedded in a much bigger church. But right at the base of Assisi is the small chapel where the very original Franciscans got together and rebuilt that church. If you're interested in great wine, Tuscany and Umbria are famous for their wine, Brunello di Montalcino. Well, there's a town called Montalcino, and there's a town called Montepulciano, two names you see a lot when you enjoy wine, and you can visit towns like Montepulciano and Montalcino and Pienza and others in this area just outside of Siena. When you go to these small towns in Tuscany and Umbria, make a point to enjoy the culture. Go to a steakhouse. Chianti wine is from this region. Chianina beef is from the same root as Chianti wine, and the Chianina beef is considered the best around. And you go to a steakhouse, and I'll never forget sitting in this steakhouse in this little town where it's famous for its red wine. Great steak, great red wine, great local clientele. What a wonderful dinner. And you've got in the back, there's a big hunk of beef on like a gurney, and a guy with a big knife, and you just hear whack, whack, and then you look at it and he's got a slab of meat, and they run it out and they let you look at it and they tell you what it'll cost, and then you say okay, and then you don't tell them how you want it cooked. There's just one way to cook it. 7 minutes on your plate, you see. So it's just, that's the way it is, and their guys are prancing around with their beautiful slab of meat, and you just get caught up in this red meat passion while you are in these little villages, and it is just a delightful thing. You complement that with the beautiful, rich red wine of the region, the Brunello and so on, and spend some time and money doing your tastings here. And again, you got to spend the money for the great wine. And you can do it with small glasses and still have the experience. You don't need to spend $100 for a bottle. But you can go to these little wine tasting places and have that experience. And there's nothing quite like it to go straight to the winery and have a guy like Adamo to take you around and give you a tour and then let you sample their wine. It's just a beautiful experience. And then when you've spent all that money on the expensive wine, then you go to a filling station. And you find the cheapest liquid you can buy in Europe. It's just table wine, red or white. And a couple of times a year, locals will bring their car filled with empty jugs to the filling station just on the side of the road, and they literally fill up their tanks that way. And it's cheaper than a Coke, you know? I mean, it's amazing. If you want the real countryside experience, I challenge you to find an agriturismo. This is a beautiful thing. Now, the word agriturismo is a special word where farms can call themselves an agriturismo if they're still a working farm, if they're making money farming, and they rent out extra rooms to make ends meet. We've heard about the struggle of small family farms. In the United States, I guess they just die out. In Italy, they're helping them out because they really want that little connection with their past. They want to have that vibrancy in the countryside of the small family farms being viable. And what they do is they let them subsidize their income by renting out rooms and have this prestigious title, agriturismo. Guidebooks explain the good agriturismos. Some of them you can book in for a week, and it's sort of like Italian culture boot camp. You cook, you get truffles, you do everything Italian, and it's a beautiful experience if you have the time to really get into that salt-of-the-earth culture. One of my favorite hill towns, and you find these hill towns all over the place. Remember, when Rome fell, chaos. What do? You head for the hills. You can't stay in the valley anymore, it's not protected. So you get on a hilltop and you fortify your community. Orvieto is a classic hill town. Look at it, stuck on that volcanic sort of plug. And when you go to Orvieto, the centerpiece is going to be its cathedral. I want to remind you, you've got bus service it's difficult because the trains are down on the valley floor, right? They don't have trains going up into the hill towns. When your train stops in the valley floor, pay attention. Everybody who commutes is walking directly from the train to the bus, and the bus carries you on right to the main square, like clockwork. But if you stop to go to the bathroom or get a coffee or just take a picture, you could miss that bus, and there's not another bus until the next train arrives. So be into that sync with the commuters, and you'll go right to the main square. About an hour away from Orvieto is my classic hill town. This is Civita di Bagnoregio. And here we have a town that goes way back to Etruscan times. It's hard to get there because you have to hike up that donkey path. The government preserves that place. There's no comfortable hotels. It's a very rustic look at old Italy. Civita di Bagnoregio. We cover it very clearly in our guidebooks. And when you come here, it's called the Dead City. The traditional residents have all passed away or moved into old folks' homes in big cities nearby, and people have bought it up now that are, big city people. So you won't find the old characters there anymore, but you will find a charming slice of Italian country life, beautiful bruschetta, wonderful views, and a chance to imagine what life was like through the centuries in the countryside of Italy, just north of Rome. All over Italy, you'll find characteristic hotels. Italy can be expensive in the big cities, but don't marvel at how expensive Italy is if you go to Florence. Florence is going to charge the most for hotels. In the countryside, you'll find little mom-and-pop hotels that are thrilled that you're there and get to know the hosts and be a good guest, and they'll help you out, and it just makes a lot of sense. You just get a simple, comfortable, safe refuge from all of your busy sightseeing during the day. If that's good enough for you, you can find very affordable rooms in the countryside. Affitta Cameri is the bed and breakfast in Italy. This is Mama Rabati, and she rents out rooms for half the price of a hotel, and your guidebooks and your web searches will help you find B&Bs in these towns, and that can save you a lot of money. I do want to remind you, it is hot in Italy in the summer. If you have any flexibility, scoot your trip into shoulder season. April, September, October, much more comfortable than July and August. I travel there in July and August quite a bit. It's manageable, but you're going to want air conditioning, and almost every room comes with air conditioning these days. If you can scoot it into shoulder season, or even bundle up and go in off-season, I think Italy makes more sense. You will find these strange-looking pieces of porcelain in your bathrooms. These are not to cool your watermelon in, okay? These are bidets, and Italians like a bidet because it lets them, what they say, wash the things that rub together when you walk, okay? It's just an alternative to a full-blown shower. And you'll find bidets in the traditional rooms, and that's what they're for. All over Italy, even especially in small towns where you can afford a gourmet restaurant, you've got creative chefs that love to do what they call a good marriage. There's this wonderful opportunity to marry different ingredients with your wine. And where the French are fancy with all their sauces and this kind of thing, the Italians pride themselves in just having the best ingredients. It's really important to eat with the season, to go with local specialties, and find restaurants that really are popular with the local travelers. One thing I always like to remind people is find a little restaurant that doesn't pay a lot of rent, a restaurant that's packed out with locals with a handwritten small menu. A handwritten menu because it's shaped by what was ever fresh in the market this morning. Small because they're only serving what they can sell at a profit, and only in one language because they're catering to locals. Tourists are more than welcome. But when you see a menu like this with local clientele in a low-rent location filled with a good, happy crowd of eaters, you know it's a good value. The birthplace of pizza is Italy, specifically Naples. I love Naples. Now, Italy intensifies as you go farther south. If Italy's getting on your nerves as far south as Rome, don't go farther south because it gets worse. If you're liking Italy as far south as Rome, go further south because it gets better, all right? Italy intensifies as you go further south. Naples is a barrel full of cultural monkeys. I can't get enough of it. Now, Naples is an intense place, but Naples is also a place that's been more and more fixed up for travelers, more comfortable for travelers these days. Recently they've had a very good mayor, and he's bringing a lot more lights and a lot more safety in the streets. And the one thing about Naples is people live in the streets. People love to live in the streets. And when you wander around the city, you'll find that's where the action is. I love wandering through the back streets of Naples and finding cruise travelers with ripped out chapters from my guidebooks. This couple has just parked their cruise ship about 6 blocks away, and there's not a hint of their cruise crowd right now. They're immersed in the wonder of Naples. Remember, if you're cruising, Italy is wonderful. You've got Venice, Florence, Rome, and Naples. All the big cruise ships hit these ports. Now, the ship docks in Venice and in Naples. In Florence and Rome, it docks at the port town nearby, about an hour away by train or bus or taxi or tour bus, you see. But you can visit all of those places with your cruise itinerary, and Naples is one of the highlights. And this is a good example how you can equip yourself with good information, leave the cruise crowd, and have a real travel experience enjoying life in the streets. Just standing on a corner in old Naples. This is one of my favorite places to be with a camera. Just sitting on a corner, watching the world go by. All the interesting things that happen on top of a Vespa. There's an old street in Naples. It's called Spaccanapoli, and it goes straight through the city. And it goes all the way back to Greek times, centuries before Christ, when Neapolis, the new city, became, that was the establishment of Naples. It was a Greek town. Naples has chaos. Naples has strikes. I mentioned there are strikes all over the place. It's not uncommon when you're in Naples to have a garbage strike. Now that's kind of gross, and you don't want to sit there with your picnic, but you're going to have piles of garbage stacking up on the street corners in Naples. You just got to remember, this is life in Naples. It's chaos, it's corrupt, it's struggling, it's intense. And if you can't handle that, you're probably not going to like Naples, so you could skip it. But I would say take all of that in stride and just remember, Naples is a package deal, okay? For sure, get down into that old center, the Spaccanapoli, with that straight street cutting right through as it has for 2,000 years. Go into the markets, clown around with the merchants, buy a loaf of bread from somebody who baked it. There are so many ways when you're in Naples to just feel like this is just a celebration of life. I cannot get enough of Naples. You wander into the back streets, into the markets. This guy's all excited about his chicken. This guy's carving shoes for people. There's so much happening. Now, Mount Vesuvius overlooks Naples. And remember, 79 years after Christ, Mount Vesuvius blew its top. And it created a lava flow that just rumbled right down that hill, from that peak to the right, burying Pompeii, which is just across the bay from Naples. If you look at art from that period, you can actually see Mount Vesuvius with its top on. But you know, this fresco was made, or this piece of art was made before the year 79 AD, when Mount Vesuvius erupted. You can go to the top of Mount Vesuvius, and you can stand on the lip of that crater and look into the steaming cauldron. And the rocks are hot, and you can just see, glowing embers, and you can see steam coming out, and you can look down on Pompeii. Go to Pompeii, walk through Pompeii. It gives you a feeling for the magnificence and the splendor of Rome better than any other city. This is Rome stopped in its tracks with that eruption, and with a good local guide, you can understand just why they had these stones in the middle of the street, and you can step into the bakery, and you can step into the tenements, and you can step into the theaters and understand what happened 2,000 years ago in ancient Rome. I have an audio tour covering Pompeii that works beautifully. If you'd like to just download that and use it while you're there, it's covered in our guidebook, and you can hire local guides. Remember, the best art from Pompeii is not in Pompeii, but it's in Naples. And this would have been excavated before Italy was united. Then Naples would have been the capital of that little country in that region. Consequently, the art would go to that city. Today it might have gone to Rome, but today the great art of Pompeii is in Naples, in the National Museum, and it would be a shame to do Pompeii without complementing that visit with a visit to the museum, the museum that has the great art of Pompeii in downtown Naples. Now, most people are more comfortable south of Naples in the Amalfi Coast area. Your headquarters for the Amalfi Coast would be Sorrento. Sorrento is a limoncello kind of place. The cruise ships park here. This is elegant. This is where you would imagine Sophia Loren is living in retirement, okay? This is where the big villas are, and this is where, since ancient Roman times, people have gone for holidays. When you go to Sorrento, you'll find a wonderful passeggiata. The passeggiata is that wonderful time in the evenings when people are out doing their vasca. Vasca means the laps. People just do their laps. They'll walk from the cathedral down to the parking lot, and then they'll go back to the cathedral. And to be out there making the scene, licking your gelato, is just a beautiful chance to feel the pulse of these great cities. The hill towns, the small towns, really gracious time. You want to be out for the passeggiata. Now, from Sorrento, you can head south to the Amalfi Coast. The Amalfi Coast is the most dramatic coastline you'll find. Very steep, very dramatic. We just had a blast filming there. This is Positano, and Positano is it's one of the most romantic places I could imagine. If you want to go for a place just to convalesce, or just to recharge, or just to get away and have a second honeymoon or something like that, probably the two most romantic places would be Verona, which I showed you on Lake Como up in the north, and Positano down here south of Sorrento. From a practical point of view, Sorrento is a better home base. From a romantic point of view, Positano is the touristy boutiques kind of place, but it's not as easy from a transportation point of view. In that area, you could stay in Naples to be right in the center of all that craziness. You could stay in Sorrento, which is a 1-hour commuter train ride from Naples, from Pompeii, and from Vesuvius. Or you could go actually down into the Amalfi Coast. I like to stay in Sorrento. I could spend 4 nights in Sorrento and side trip into Naples, side trip to Pompeii, side trip to the Amalfi Coast, and side trip out to the Isle of Capri. There's 4 great days of side trips right there, not even to mention a day of enjoying the town of Sorrento. You can spend a lot of time in Sorrento. Off-season, it's very quiet. Peak season, it is one big long traffic jam on that scenic road, okay? So it behooves you, I think, to go in shoulder season when the beaches will be more empty like this in Positano. I like to hire a private taxi while I'm there. It's a bit of a splurge, but if there's 2 of you, you can divide that cost, and you can consider the value of your time. You can have a picnic dinner to save the money. But if you get a driver, and there are lots of drivers, it's a huge source of employment in Sorrento, hire a driver for the day, and they will drive you to 4 or 5 stops along the Amalfi Coast and get you back to Sorrento that night. And then you've got somebody drops you right there, gives you a little orientation, meets you in an hour, and drives you to the next town. Even if I had a car, if I could afford it, I would leave the car in Sorrento and hire Raphael or one of my driver friends that are in my guidebook to take you around. It's a luxury, and you will enjoy the Amalfi Coast with no stress. If you drive the Amalfi Coast yourself, there's almost no place to park your car. It's a major headache. Now, from Sorrento, you can take the boat out to Capri. Capri goes all the way back to ancient times as a resort. The emperors had their resort villa on the Isle of Capri. And when you go to Capri, it's really fun. You can take the gondola or the chairlift up to the top of the big mountain on the island and then hike down. That's a highlight. And for a lot of people, they go to Capri because they want to see the Blue Grotto. This is, all the cruise ship groups go here. All the tour buses go here. It's a really high-pressure tourist scam, but I got to admit, it's really fun also. You go there with a bigger boat, you transfer into a little boat, and then you get into your little boat, and your ruffian oarsman tells you, get down into under the gunwale or whatever, and you scoot way down, and just when there's a low point in the waves, there's a tiny hole in the mountain, and he times it. There's a chain, an old rusty chain. You're cowering way underneath the sides of your boat, in the bottom of it, and he pulls you through, and you pop into this amazing blue internal cave world, and the radiant water, and then your oarsman sings to you in this beautiful "O solo mio," and then he says, "And I'm not going to take you back out unless you give me more money." You see, so you got that sort of unfortunate overlay of a little bit of greedy guy, but it really is a lot of fun, and if you can swing it, that's great. Remember, 500 years before Christ, southern Italy was Magna Graecia. It was a Greek colony, and you could say the best Greek ruins are in southern Italy, better than even what you'd find in Greece. Paestum is incredible, and Paestum is just south of the Amalfi Coast. You can see wonderful Greek ruins in that part of Italy, Paestum, or you can go down to Sicily, which really has wonderful Greek ruins. When you think about Sicily, this is a very popular destination with our tour company. It's one of the hottest destinations now. You could easily spend 10 days, as we do, on that island. Sicily is an amazing overlay of civilizations. You've got Greek, you've got Norman, you've got Spanish, you've got, because it's a crossroads there, halfway between the Middle East and Africa and Europe, and that shows. Agrigento is just one of several great ancient sites. Taormina is a famous little town on a hill with a Greek temple with the most incredible view. The town of Cefalù is my favorite small town in Sicily. In Cefalù, you've got an opportunity to really just feel what Sicilian life is all about. A lot of people are nervous about crime in Sicily because they've heard of the mafia, and it can play a little trick with your brain. I would remind you, don't worry too much about crime in Sicily. Just have an adequate hotel, and remember that a tourist will not encounter that kind of crime. We've been taking groups there for 10 years. We've never had any inkling of, mafia-related crime in Sicily. It just makes no sense for a tourist to be worried about that. Well, you'll be overwhelmed by the friendliness of the Sicilian people, and it's a beautiful place to have edible culture as well. When you go to Sicily, Palermo is the big city, or Syracuse. I like Palermo the very best, and you need to go into the markets, and it's like going into Africa in some ways. There's so much intensity and exoticness in the markets, and also remember, when you're in Sicily, that's where you can get into the Capuchin monasteries and actually see a lot of bones. Capuchin monks had an interesting habit of hanging their dead brothers up to dry, and they would hang them down in the crypt, and when all the flesh is rotted away, they would take those bones and make mosaics and chandeliers and stuff, and in a lot of cases, they would just leave the bones together, wrapped up in different zones, and this would have been the professors, or this would have been the priests, or this would have been the mothers or the children, and to go into these crypts, it's just an amazing experience if you like that kind of ghoulish thing. You just got to remember the word Capuchin. Capuchin, the same as the word for cappuccino. The monks, the cappuccino looks like the color of their robe. Beautiful, beautiful interior of Sicily. I want to remind you once again, the guidebooks give you the details of all of this Italy. When we think about the wonders of Italy, we covered in our TV show, and you've got the specifics on that. It's a quick reminder, you can follow us on Facebook. I love to take people along when I'm making our TV shows and when we're doing the guidebook research or leading the tours. If you just go to Rick Steves on Facebook, you get to kind of stow away and enjoy that dimension. If you want more details in our website at ricksteves.com, You've got 9 years of radio archives where you can listen to interviews about Sicily or about Tuscany or about hunting for truffles in Piedmont, all these dimensions of Italian culture that you get the most in the countryside. Go to the radio corner at ricksteves.com, and you can then drill into that and find interviews with our friends from Italy that can give you more information. As I said, all of our TV shows are available on the website, and there's lots more information there. Obviously, if you want to know about our guidebooks, our luggage, any of our gear, our TV shows, and our tours, you've got that at ricksteves.com. Our tour brochure explains our different tour programs, and there is a DVD in the brochure that gives you a virtual front row seat for 45 minutes. If you want just to go online, you can watch the same video clip in the tour section of our website. We've got 35 different itineraries. If you look at that spaghetti map of European tour routes, it's most dense in Italy. Italy is my favorite country, and when you look at those routes, you'll find our best of Europe in 20 days itinerary. It would be 8 days in Italy: Venice, Florence, Rome, and the Italian Riviera, starting in Amsterdam, finishing in Paris. That's the best 3 weeks that Europe has to offer. My idea of the best 2 weeks that Europe has to offer is open jaws, starting in the north and going straight to Rome. And that would go from Amsterdam through Germany, over the Alps, Venice, Tuscany, and Rome. For the best 20 days in Italy, this is one of my favorite itineraries. We fly, remember, these are all open jaws itineraries. I think it's been 10 years since I flew in and out of the same city. Even for an Italy trip, think about flying what travel agents call open jaw, into one city and out of another city. You don't need to go back to your starting point. There's no reason to spend the time to do that. What I like to do is, for an Italy trip, this is what we do with our Best of Italy tour, but you could do it on your own very easily. Fly into Milan, and then immediately go up to Verona on Lake Como that we saw. That's where you get over jet lag. 2 nights there and a whole day to relax and explore the lake. 10 minutes from Verona across the water is Bellagio. Then you head over to Verona, the town of Romeo and Juliet. You head up to the Dolomites, the Italian Alps, and you go to Castle Roto. Down to Venice for a couple of days. These numbers indicate the number of nights on our 20-day itinerary. Then you'd head down to Florence for a couple of days, stop at Pisa on the way to the Cinque Terre. After Venice and Florence, you want a time to relax and decompress. You do that on the Italian Riviera. And then down to Siena, Assisi, a little bit of the countryside in Umbria, Montalcino and Montepulciano and the wine country, and then you head on down to Rome. Now that would be what we think is the best 3 weeks in Europe. This is possible, and this is actually reasonable with a tour guide and a bus. If you're doing it on your own, you might want to take a little more time, because I think you cover about 30% more per day when you have an organized tour to take you around. Now this would be what we consider Village Italy tour. And this, you'll notice there's no big names there, but you could do a very busy and exciting and fulfilling 17 days in Italy and never go to any of the famous places. And that's something that you can look on our website and learn the details, and then you can actually, and this is a very good tip, learn from a tour company's approach to an itinerary, and if you're inclined to do it on your own, do it on your own. Take advantage of that as a template and then tailor it to your interest. Because Americans have the shortest vacations in the rich world, we don't have 22 days for a vacation. We used to do Italy in 22 days, including Naples. Now we've cut it off. We've got the best of Italy, and then we've got southern Italy. So this is a very popular tour of ours that really goes south of Rome, starting in Rome and finishing in Naples. The core of Rome, if you just had 8 days, the core of Italy, if you had 8 days and you had to be selective, this is what I would recommend doing. You could fly into Rome, and from the Roman airport, you could just go into the station, hop on an express train, and in 2 hours be in Florence. I've done that before. It works quite well. Fly into Rome, but spend your first night in Florence. Then you'd settle into Florence for a couple days. You'd go to the Cinque Terre for a couple days, drop into Lucca, which is a beautiful hill town, on the way to Volterra, my favorite hill town, and from Volterra, you'd finish off down in Rome and fly home from there. That would be the core of Italy in 8 days, and if you only have 10 days and you want maximum thrills, of course, you just fly into Venice and out of Rome and do Venice, Florence, and Rome. I'll tell you, I have so much fun when I'm researching my books and traveling through Italy, because we've got so many tours there, and I keep bumping into our tours and our tour guides and see what a great job our guides are doing. One thing our guides are really enthusiastic about is priming people to understand the Italian culture. Learn the words, learn the menus, learn the coffee culture. Here we have Alfio giving our groups sort of a prep on how to use your language skills when you're out in the streets. Italians don't expect you to have it down perfect like the French do, okay? Italians are thrilled you're there, they're thrilled you're trying, and if you butcher their language, they're going to say, molto buono, you know, that is so beautiful. And then they're going to wrestle you to the ground and try to get you to say it again, you know? It's just, they want you to communicate. And when you try, you endear yourself to the Italians and you have a great trip. I was just there last year. I was taking one of our tours. For 25 years, I led our tours. For the last 10 years, I've been taking our tours. And I had so much fun with the group, complimenting our guides' work, taking our groups out, helping them get the lay of the land. When you get into town, figure out the buses. You know, the buses work great. Use the taxis. Taxis seem like a splurge, but in Italy, they're time well spent. I mean, money well spent because your time is money. And if there's 3 or 4 of you especially, I would routinely hop into a taxi. These days, they are government regulated and they're not going to rip you off. You'll find all sorts of fun ways to connect with Italy, and that's what we're all about at Europe Through the Back Door. We're working hard. There's 100 of us. We're so thankful to have people trusting us for their vacations, and we just do whatever we can to organize this information so you can learn from our experience rather than your own and travel smarter. Italy is probably the most challenging country in Europe. It's the country more than any other country where you need to plan in advance, where you need to anticipate the crowds, where you need to have a few language skills. But if you have a well-planned trip, if you equip yourself with good information and expect yourself to travel smart, I think you will embrace that culture and you will have the time of your life, all right? So this was a look at small town Italy, complementing the big cities. Put all of that together, and I hope that it works really well for you. Thank you very much, and happy travels. Thank you. Thank you.